Well, I was just out in the great Pacific Northwest. Shags is home without him. To get even, he's leaving in a week or so to go out there and see his family. Because we're both so high on the Pacific Northwest right now, we figured we'd go ahead and bring in the most consummate outdoorsman we know in that part of the world, in this media genre of the outdoors. And I can't wait to dig into how he enjoys life outdoors in the Pacific Northwest. I'm Brandon Butler.
I'm Nathan Shags McLeod.
And I'm John Kruse, host of Northwestern Outdoors Radio and America Outdoors Radio.
And welcome to the Drifting Outdoors podcast. First, we got a couple of big announcements. Again, a reminder to meet up with us at Big Rock Candy Mountain on February 28th, the eve of opening day of trout season here in Missouri. We'll be recording a podcast in front of what we call a live studio audience at the bar at Big Rock Candy Mountain. Montauk says they're going to be open, but we don't know about availability on cabins. But we do know Big Rock Candy Mountain has a lot of places where you can crash for the weekend. It's an amazing venue, and you are welcome to join us that Friday night before opening day. They're going to have things going on all weekend long. It's just a big party. It's an event, and we'd love to have you with us Friday, February 28th, Big Rock Candy Mountain, 7 p.m. for the Driftwood Outdoors podcast celebrating opening day. Mark Van Patent, old Bill Cooper may make an appearance. We're going to have Uncle Keith and a lot of semi-paid and non-paid pro staffers there. So please join us. In the other exciting announcement, Brandon, I'm really stoked about this, is our good friend Chris Nelson with Tandem Fly Outfitters reached out saying, hey man, you guys are on YouTube. You want to promote it? We need subscribers. How about we give away a free walleye fishing trip in the height of walleye season with Driftwood Outdoors? So that's right. If you just subscribe to our YouTube channel, you are entered to win a fishing trip with me, Brandon, and the elite walleye guy in Missouri, Chris Nelson. We got the date picked for a Saturday in April, and we'll meet up on Stockton Lake. We'll go slew some walleye, and why wouldn't you just go to YouTube and subscribe, Driftwood Outdoors TV on the YouTuber, and get entered to win that amazing fishing trip.
Yeah, I can't wait to do that trip. Thank you to Chris Nelson. I mean, what a good friend that we have in him, and really our whole network of our guide buddies out there. But Chris, he came up with this on his own to help us out. So we're incredibly appreciative. And if you don't think there's walleye in Missouri, well, this trip will change your mind. Stockton Lake, when it's hot, it's hot. There's great walleye fishing. Can't wait to get down there myself. And on the Big Rock Candy Mountain event, if you haven't booked a cabin yet up there at Big Rock, you better get on it, because I keep hearing from people that I got my cabin. So they must be running pretty slim on cabins up there. If you're tough, take a tent. There's plenty of room, but it's going to be a good time, man. I can't wait to be down there, see Roger and the whole crew.
Bring the RV down, camp out with us. It's going to be a blast. And that walleye trip is April 19th. It will be a Saturday in April in the height of walleye fishing here in Missouri. So just go to YouTube again. You just got to be a subscriber and you're automatically entered to win that trip. And before we get into this podcast, I think we got to say it. How about them Chiefs back in the Super Bowl? John, I'm curious. I'm going to ask your opinion because all my family is in the Pacific Northwest area. And other than my mom, who I took her to her first pro football game, and it was at Arrowhead when I was out here, so she's a Chiefs fan, but all of them can't stand it. They're in the realm of the refs. We get all the calls, and it's scripted, and the NFL is cheating so the Chiefs can get back in the Super Bowl again, which makes me laugh. Like, all the owners are like, you know what? Yeah, that the smallest market, one of them rinky-dink markets, let's put them in the Super Bowl every single year. That's the script we all agree on. But what do you feel? Are you a Seahawks fan? That's my brother's favorite. Always has been his favorite team.
Well, I am a Seahawks fan, living in the Pacific Northwest. I hate to admit it. Everybody in the bar last night was rooting for the Bills.
Oh, they hate us. It's too funny. That's definitely true.
It actually isn't a matter of hating.
We've got 50 million Swifties on our side, though.
That's true. And it's not a matter of hating the Chiefs. It's just like, come on, let's give somebody else a turn.
And all these Swifties must think football's pretty easy because since they started caring, their team goes to the Super Bowl every year.
That's true. That's true.
I was joking because I do a morning show on a classic rock station, and we're going to get into radio here shortly. But I was just thanking all the refs and Roger Goodell and the script writers for keeping our dark overlord Taylor Swift happy by letting us be back in the Super Bowl again, because I am all in on just stirring the pot, and I enjoy. I was joking of just lapping up the tears of everyone crying about that AFC championship game.
Well, I was just over at Starline Brass talking to Bobby Hayden, who's a longtime season ticket holder, and he was at the game last night. And I started giving him a little grief. I said, "Look, man, I'm because I'm a new Chiefs fan. I've lived in Missouri for 15 years. I think it's fair now that I like both the Chiefs, but I'm a Bears fan. I'm a Bears fan. No matter how bad I don't want to be, I can't get it out of my blood. Every year, I try to divorce them, marry the Chiefs, and every year, my loyalty remains. But I do love the Chiefs, and I've been to games, and it's fun, and Missouri embraces it, and it's my adopted state's home team, and so it just so happens that it's a dynasty right now, and I'm not gonna shy away from it just because they're good. And but Bobby is just unapologetic. We've sucked for so many years.
That's so true.
It's been horrible for so long. Like,
Yes,
we're gonna ride it. And I told him it was very much. It feels very much like when I was a kid, growing up by Chicago, and I know what it felt like. You never wanted the Bulls to lose. You never wanted Jordan to lose a game. And Patrick Mahomes is the best player in football. I mean, I dare you to try to argue that at this point. He's Superman. He's unbelievable.
Yep. So one of my best friends back home that lives in the Portland area, he sent me a picture of his smartphone and his beats per minute, and his heart rate was up at like 135 during that game. And it was a workout on your heart, man. This year has been just nothing but stress watching them because they continue to win. But boy, they are not blowing anyone out. It's been a wild ride so far.
Did you lose the faith at all in the game? Did you think this is it? The Bills are going to do it?
No,
I didn't either. It wasn't
the refs on our side.
Well, that's true, and the power of Taylor Swift. But I never had a moment watching that whole game where I thought they were going to lose.
No. Well, I mean, there was a couple of times where I was getting a little worried, but I was trying I'm very superstitious playing college basketball back in the day. I have like sports superstitions and try to get in routines and see what's working. We tried to make a bowl of turnover popcorn because I was looking for a turnover from the Bills and tried a little bit of everything. So I wouldn't say I was worried, but I was digging deep into my sports superstitions to try to change some momentum at times. We got any predictions? Oh, go ahead, John.
I got to say, again, being in a bar full of Bills fans, the Bills never really, I mean, they were close, but none of us felt like the Bills were going to win it. It's like, can we at least keep up? Can we at least go to overtime? And didn't happen, obviously.
Now, you're calling it a bar full of Bills fans. You were in Washington State. I think that just kind of proves that if you're not in Kansas City or close proximity, everybody in the country was cheering against the Chiefs. That's how it was when the Patriots were good. That's how it was when the Bulls were good. Like, it feels nice to be at that level where everyone wants you to lose because you've been so good for so long.
You got a point. You got an excellent point there.
Oh no, my nieces, like everyone was sending me memes of the Chiefs like kissing the refs and the refs like teaming up with the team. Because I know back home everyone hates the Chiefs other than like my buddy Heath. But we grew up Chiefs fans. Like I remember Christian or the Nigerian Nightmare Okoye and some of those older players and even Joe Montana going there in his later years. Like, I grew up watching the Chiefs play and was always a fan. So it's nice to now live in a state and get to relish in everyone else hating us. I love it. So what are our predictions for the big game coming up in a week? The Eagles versus the Chiefs.
Man, the Eagles looked really good yesterday.
Saquon Barkley, man. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
I think the Chiefs might not get their three-peat because the Eagles did look just outstanding.
Yeah. Did anyone think he was that good of running back? I know he was good. He was okay. He was a pretty good running back in New York, but that just goes to show you how bad the Giants O-line was. That guy goes to Philadelphia and cannot be stopped.
I mean, if they win the Super Bowl, it'll be hard to argue that it's not the best season ever by a running back. I mean, it's right up there in all statistical categories. And if you take it all the way to the trophy, he's got to be right there with the best statistical running back year of all time. So
well,
I think the Chiefs get it done. They find a way to win. And when you have the best player, you have the best chance. And Mahomes is the best player. I like Jalen Hurts. Even when he was at Alabama, who likes anybody from Alabama? But I liked him when he was there. What happened to him with Tua and the class that he showed? I've always rooted for him since he's been in the league, but he's not on the same level as Patrick Mahomes. And if the Chiefs defense can figure out how to shut down Barkley, and if I had one defensive coach to pick, I'd want Spags. So it's like, I like it. I think we'll get it done.
In Spags, we trust. There's one guy that can come up with a scheme to stop the best running back possibly of all time in the NFL. It's that guy. And
yeah,
man,
if the Eagles beat us with Jalen Hurts throwing the ball, then God bless them. They deserve the Super Bowl. But we'll figure out how to defend against that run.
You guys forget, though, the script's already been written, baby. Like, it's going to be a three-peat for the Chiefs. I'm just stirring the pot. I'm just going to keep stirring it.
So, John, as you can see, this is a very dedicated to the outdoors podcast.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, football is played outdoors, so I'll give you that.
Yeah, there we go. I like the way you think.
Say that our podcast is about interesting people who enjoy the outdoors, and most guys that enjoy the outdoors also enjoy football. So I don't feel like we need to apologize.
Well, let's get right into it. I'm curious how you two met.
Through the outdoor media world, through some conferences over time. I don't really remember exactly when. That's what's neat about this media industry that we're all in. And John's had me on his radio show a number of times, and I've wanted to get him on the podcast for quite a while because I know you two are going to have so much in common with doing radio and also being from that part of the world. I'll just say that, in a world of a lot of different outdoor media types, John's just a great guy, and I really enjoy talking to him. And he's of that generation that doesn't know how to silence their cell phone. So I am.
I'm the old guy.
Now he's got me panicking. I'm checking my phone to make sure, like, oh boy, I better turn mine on, turn off.
So, he's really good at what he does. Very professional, and I've just enjoyed becoming friends, and I think it'll be fun to talk about how you two can share stories about what you enjoy about that part of the world.
Well, let's get right into the radio part first. Like, John, was that something that you always wanted to do, or did you just stumble into it? And we lost him.
To become a writer. And I was going to be the next Ernest Hemingway in my mind. And what happened was...
John, hold on a second. We lost you there for a second. So let me just ask the question again and start from the beginning.
You went black on us.
You went black on us.
Oh.
It's fine. I'm new to this, but I'm hoping to figure it out that we can edit that part out. So we'll see how it goes. But John, let me ask you, have you always wanted to get into radio, or did you just stumble into it?
I literally stumbled into it. So I actually went to college at Eastern Washington University because they had a creative writing program and I wanted to be a writer. And 2 quarters in, I learned a valuable lesson about college, that athletics trumps academics. So they wanted the football program to go up to another division. So they cut the entire creative writing program and half the English department out. And so I got a degree in applied psychology and went in the Army. And I didn't start writing until I was close to 40 years old. And then I got into it and started getting published in various magazines and newspapers. And then I was also a police officer at the time. I was actually a police sergeant, and I was the public information officer. And the local radio station said, "We know you love the outdoors and you write about it. We know you can talk on the radio because you talk to us just about every day. Would you like to help us put together this outdoors radio show? All you have to do is 3 minutes. Just come in before you come to work, record a 3-minute segment about what to do, where to go, whatever. And that's it." And so that's how I started back in 2003. And so did that for about 4 years. And then the host left and I became the host, and I was awful. I'll admit it. I sounded like William Shatner. You know, you have to find your own voice. And I didn't find mine for a while. I found William Shatner's voice. So it was like, "Today on Northwestern Outdoors Radio, we're going to talk about fishing, hunting, and other things you can do outdoors." I couldn't believe they kept me on the air. It was pathetic. I actually had a guy call up once, and it's like, "Caller, what do you want to know? Would you please shut up and put on the fruit frost forecast so we can find out whether it's going to be frosty tonight for our fruit?"
Rough, man, rough.
Oh, that's amazing.
That was my start.
Listening to Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn on each other's podcasts on the drive back from South Dakota, and Joe Rogan was talking about the voices people used to make up to do the news and to be in movies. It was like really Marlon Brando that broke it, according to Rogan, that started using a natural voice. But if you think about the way they used to report the news, you see the old clips of it and people on movies, they used a fake voice. So maybe you were just trying to carry on a tradition, John.
Maybe I was, or maybe I was just really sucky at what I did. But eventually I got better. So there's that. And I definitely use my natural voice now.
Yeah, that's too funny. Well, that's the thing in radio too. You always hear people like, "Hi, everybody." They always have like these really weird, flamboyant voices on the radio. And then you meet them in person. It's like, that's not what you sound like at all. Because for me personally, it has always been a dream of mine to be on the radio. The music was kind of getting in the way because I was fascinated about these disc jockeys, these radio DJs that were getting paid to do everything I was getting in trouble at school for, like making wisecracks or making prank phone calls in my spare time. So it was always a dream. And I went to a private Lutheran college to play basketball. And you were talking about how athletics trump stuff. We were there the first year they went up a Division II into NCAA Division II. So they were a very private, small NAIA school before. And they brought in all this junior college transfers because I played at Chemeketa Community College there in Salem for a couple of years, Salem, Oregon. And these poor professors and students all there for seminary, and all of us like junior college transfers coming into juniors, because there was 2 years where we weren't eligible for any postseason play. So they just wanted to bring people in that could start a program, start a decent base. They didn't expect us. They didn't want us to win it all because we couldn't play any playoffs, but they didn't want us to come in last place either, to get a base for recruiting moving forward. So you would have thought that they recruited Satan and all his minions themselves. Because they didn't, as you imagined, as you learned too, they didn't get a say in moving up. Suddenly, there was just a private, small school that didn't worry about athletics. There was more about seminary and that type of thing, to where, no, we're going to start taking athletics a little more serious. And here are all these giant human beings coming in and wreaking havoc. That's what they thought. I mean, we all got along, but it was just a funny, eye-opening experience for sure. Because
let's dig into some of the outdoor opportunities in your guys' neck of the woods. I was just out there steelhead fishing in Oregon.
Good.
Pretty remarkable. I've caught a lot of steelhead out of the Great Lakes. This is the first time I've ever caught a steelhead that, was in the salt and then back up in the river. So
you caught a real steelhead.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I feel that way. I mean, the steelhead that I catch up in the Pere Marquette, up in Michigan, Wisconsin, clearly they're real steelhead shags, but they are not.
Depends
native.
on who you ask.
They're not native to that neck of the woods, And it is pretty remarkable that we have these species that can just kind of adapt. The fact that we have Pacific salmon in Chicago, like, is kind of wild, but yeah, it did feel really good to go out there and be on one of those beautiful rivers and catch a steelhead where a steelhead belongs, where it's supposed to be. But man, we floated probably by 5 or 6 waterfalls. Any of it have been the most scenic, beautiful waterfall in the state of Missouri. Like, our guide was just, yeah, no big deal. It's just, we're like, stop, we want to get a picture. It's like girls and butterflies. That's how I felt about these waterfalls. But that neck of the woods is gorgeous, and I got to go out and blacktail hunt with Shags and Uncle Steve. So I'm in love with it, but I'm not from there like you guys. What is it, John, that really gets you excited about that part of the world and spending your time outdoors?
Well, salmon and steelhead fishing has been tough in recent years, but we got a bounce back this year, and I'm hoping that's going to be the start of a trend of bounce backs. So I fell in love with steelhead fishing not as a young man, or as a kid, but as a young man. So steelhead fishing with my dad used to be this. We would go down to a place where there was always sticker bushes, and you would go through the sticker bushes, and it was always raining, and it was always cold, and you'd plunk, and you'd catch nothing, and you went home. And it's like, this sucks. But then I moved to Central Washington or Eastern Washington, and I'd be trout fishing on rivers like the Wenatchee River or the Methow River, and the steelheading was excellent. And it was just, you're tossing spinners just like you are for trout, except they're bigger. They're like number 4 spinners or number 3 spinners instead of 1s and 2s. And yeah, I just fell in love with it once I started getting into it. And the best part is, at certain times of year, you're catching not just a steelhead, but also Chinook salmon as well. And I remember one day on the Methow River, which is in north central Washington, my buddy and I, we had like 19 hookups in one day, which is unheard of for a day of steelhead fishing, where if you get one hookup, you're happy.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had like 19 hookups. I remember vividly, we both cast our spinners at the same time into the river. They both landed like 5 yards from each other. Both immediately hit. Both fish came out of the water, and I had a steelhead and he had on a salmon. It was just, wow, this is the best. So yeah, I love steelhead fishing. It is on the comeback, so that's a good thing. And happy to report I was on the Clearwater River in Idaho and actually got a 17-pounder in September.
Wow.
Yeah, that was right up there with my personal best. Also caught on the Clearwater about 3 years ago.
That's awesome.
How far would that fish have had to swim from the ocean to get to Clearwater, Idaho? That's
about 500 miles.
That's crazy.
Yes.
And they do that every year.
And it was in great shape. I mean, it wasn't dark at all, because this was September. Those steelhead, they'll be there till March when they finally spawn.
Oh yeah, everybody was trying to insult my steelhead because it was a run back. I guess that's when they're on their way back to the ocean.
Yeah, I never caught one of those before.
So I guess somehow that diminishes your steelhead, but I wasn't.
It does not.
That. I was not.
It means it's a tired steelhead. That's all it means.
Yeah, like a hungry steelhead. Like, I don't know.
Because I grew up like right on the mouth of the Columbia,
yes.
Like in the Astoria area, about 30 minutes inland. I don't know if you're familiar with a little town called Claskenai, right there on the Columbia River, but That's where I grew up. So it's kind of like what you were talking about. My dad didn't do a lot of the small rivers or stream steelhead fishing. It was more of, you were on the banks of the Columbia with a spin glow and a bell on your rod for salmon or steelhead, depending on the season, or in the boat. I was too ADD, too spastic as a kid to be in the boat. There's a fun story about how I ate everyone's lunch one day. Even his best friends from high school that he grew up with were in the boat, and his name was Rudy, and he was looking around for his sack lunch, and he found it on the ground completely empty, because I had gone through all the lunches out of boredom and ate all 3 of them. but I have enjoyed now as a grown man going back and trying to fly fish some of the small streams, at the end of the runs, the little Nat creeks and big creeks there. And I haven't got one on a fly rod yet, but there's just something pretty special about a stream that you could literally probably get a running start and jump across and trying to catch an 8, 9, 10, and if you're lucky enough, a 17-pound steelhead in it, because it can get real wild in close quarters. But I haven't done anything like what Brandon was talking about, where some of the bigger rivers in Southern Oregon with the drift boats. But I'm hoping, because I'm going back for the Valentine's Day area. Shout out to my parents celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. So I'll be back out there for that and meeting up with one of my good friends from high school, Brad Brooks, my fishing buddy. And he's like, yeah, I'll find some water. We'll find a steelhead trip. So I think we might be out in the boat for that one.
Well, I dug
Nice.
out the business card. I couldn't remember all the details of my guide from Oregon. We're going to have him on the podcast soon, but his name is DM, and that's because he's got 2 first names. Don Mike is his name, and it's Fishy Waters. So fishywaters.fish is his website. Great guy. And, we talked about Chris Nelson. We've really put together a nice list of outfitter friends that we work with: Dwayne Doty, Blake Harris, Chuck Grease, all down at Taneycomo, Kevin Morlock up in Michigan. And I'm really excited to add DM to our list of outfitter buddies, especially for you going back to Oregon. If you could get an opportunity to go down and fish with them and spend some time as well, I think that'd be awesome.
I would totally look forward to that. That would be a good time. So John, I got to ask then, is steelhead your go-to fish? Because growing up as a kid, I always enjoyed sturgeon fishing more than anything else. I think it was probably because of the action, but anymore, especially on the Columbia River, the steelhead have just been decimated by all the seals and sea lions. You don't really get seasons for them anymore. But is the steelhead your go-to, your primo species to chase in the Pacific Northwest?
It was for about 10 years, and then the runs declined. And so I ended up, believe it or not, becoming a bass angler more than anything else. Bass, panfish, and walleye. So I actually live right across the road from Potholes State Park. And Potholes State Park sits on Potholes Reservoir, which is a 27,000 acre reservoir, which is it's actually one of the top bass fisheries in the Western U.S. So it's got smallmouth bass, it's got largemouth bass, rainbow trout, channel cats, perch, crappie, bluegill, just about and walleye. And it's just an excellent fishery. So I spend most of my time just fishing my home lake anymore.
That's awesome. Growing up as a kid, man, everyone used to make fun of us so much because when Bill Dance came on the scene, like we were ate up with the idea of bass fishing. And oh man, we'd go and buy the big fancy lures. And I just remember all the older generation just laughing and making fun of us for chasing these ditch pickles and trash fish instead of being out trying to catch a salmon or a steelhead or some native cutthroat trout. And I even told Bill Dance, we were lucky enough to interview Bill Dance for our 100th episode. And I told him how much I enjoyed like picking up pop cans, walking railroad tracks so I could cash them in to go buy a lure to try to bass fish, because he inspired me to start hitting some more slewy areas. And it's pretty amazing. Now you go back and I got cousins that do bass tournaments, and how so many people now in the Pacific Northwest are ate up with bass fishing. I was like, where were you guys 20 years ago, 30 years ago when we were getting made fun of and run off places?
The only thing I know about bass fishing out there, and I want to throw this in as well for John, is the John Day. Smallmouth fisher.
Smallmouth.
So go ahead and tell us about bass fishing out there, but I want to get to the John Day as well.
Well, the John Day is an excellent fishery. I got to go out there with a guide named Steve Fleming, Maha Outfitters, and this was like 20 years ago. He's like 75 years old, and he's still rowing a drift boat down the John Day. But you'll catch 100 bass a day. But 95 of those bass are going to be like 6 inches.
Okay.
So lots of small bass, but I mean, I did catch a legit 4-pounder out of there, and a few other good ones. It's chock full of fish. It's just most of them are really small. But the Columbia River, though, has turned into an excellent, I mean, top-rate smallmouth bass fishery. And and they actually have tournaments where smallmouth bass are the main target of the bass tournaments.
Is there
So
a
we're-
stretch in there that is kind of the main thoroughfare?
It's actually anywhere from the Bonneville Pool, which is west of Portland or east of Portland, all the way up to like the confluence of the Snake River. So a good portion of the Columbia has some really good bass fishing and walleye fishing too. As a matter of fact, it's interesting how they manage fisheries. So Oregon and Washington are very much cold water centric. So they want to have steelhead and salmon succeed, and they look down on bass and walleye. So on the Columbia River, they've actually lifted all limits on bass and walleye. They want people to catch them and reduce the population because they feel that the bass and walleye are eating the smolt of the salmon and steelhead. However, what happened was the Columbia was like a trophy class walleye fishery 10 years ago. People would come all the way from the Great Lakes to come fish the Columbia River in the winter in hopes of catching a 20-pound walleye. And you could at least get like a 4 or a 10-plus pound walleye on a good day with a guide. And those days are pretty much gone because of the new regulations, tribal gill netting for walleye in particular. And if you get a 10-pounder anymore, you're doing really good.
Have you eaten any of the smallmouth?
I don't eat the bass. I'm a catch and release guy on the bass, but I will always keep an eater-sized walleye. I'll throw back the big ones. But, you give me a 16 to 20-inch walleye, I love them.
Oh, man. My girlfriend says that bass give you cancer. So if you eat a bass, you
Well, she was a tournament fisherman in college, so yeah, she's not a big fan of people that eat the bass.
Yeah,
I've eaten a couple.
It's been a long time since I've
many.
eaten a bass.
Yeah, I don't want to eat any of them out of a river like the current river or somewhere where we know it's taken them, 10 years to get to a good size. But if there was a fishery where they're not supposed to be there and you want to take them out, like a smallmouth is good under those circumstances.
I ate smallies as a kid, and I agree with you. I would not agree about largemouth, though. Largemouth are not great table fare.
As soon as they get over 12 inches, I would agree with you. Like if you take 10-inch, 11-inch largemouth out of a lake or a pond, which you need to do, otherwise they become stunted pretty easily. You mix those in with crappie or bluegill, and you can't really tell the difference when they're that little. But yeah, anything over a pound, 2 pounds, they get mushy, especially in the summer. So,
right.
We ate crappie last night. We did a fish fry. We ate those crappie that we got from the last trip with Chris Nelson, and I invited Shags out, but they didn't want to make the drive to come eat the crappie, so I had to just polish them off myself.
Well, it doesn't help when your alarm goes off at like 4 a.m. and then you're watching the football game until 9, and you live an hour away, so that wasn't going to happen.
Well, I left. Pretty exciting story. I'll tell a little bit more about it in a minute, but I was in Pierre, South Dakota for a Delta Waterfowl event as the Retrieving Freedom CEO, and left there at 10:08 p.m. and got home to my driveway in Missouri at 8:04 a.m. Not saying it was the smartest drive I've ever made, but I wanted to be home for the games and for the fish fry. And once I hit the Missouri line, I was committed. At first, I was going to stop in Sioux Falls, and I was going to stop in Sioux City. Then I got past Omaha. I hit that Missouri line, and I wasn't stopping. But I did have to get out of my car a number of times and run circles around my vehicle, drive down the highway at 70 miles an hour with my head out of the window. Just yeah,
you're hardcore, man.
Very hardcore.
But I was there in my recliner.
Too old for that anymore.
Oh, dude, I know. when are we going to get that private jet money? Like,
This is going to be the podcast that does it. We just had to get
That's
John
right.
on here. and
that's
then
why I had
suddenly-
John on. I feel like NetJet's going to be calling at any minute. Hold your breath.
Get our G6.
Yeah. So
Well, you were talking about the regulations and them being so worried about everything eating the salmon smolts. But I mean, that goes along too with the pike minnow, the squawfish. And we had a story earlier this year about somebody out there that made like $120,000 this past year squaw fishing. Have you tried making any money on that? They made it a little bit easier now with checking in with apps and everything. Because when I tried, it was dang near impossible.
I have tried it, and actually the angler last year for 2024, he made $164,000.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And this is just in 5 months of fishing. So the guy basically lived on his boat and was brought supplies. But I mean, in 5 months, he made 164K. Second place angler made almost 100 grand too. So I mean, it was a good year for pike minnow fishing. I have tried it. When I tried, the app was brand new and it wasn't working that well. So I did the check-in station where you go the day before, you check in, you get your little, piece of paper, and then you come back the next day with your fish. And what we found pike minnow fishing is that it's kind of fun because you don't know what you're going to catch, especially if you're like, just plunking night crawlers off the bottom. I mean, yeah, you'll catch pike minnow, but you'll also catch bass. And my best friend caught a 3-foot sturgeon pike minnow fishing just off of night crawlers with like 8-pound test. That was interesting. So it's fun. We've not made a lot of money off of it, but we do it 1 or 2 times a year just for fun.
Yeah, I remember trying it, and this was like in the infancy, like the early stages, and you had to check in the day of, so you had to get up early, go to a check station, which was like 30 minutes away from where I grew up in my small little town, and then I have to drive 30 minutes back to where the water I wanted to fish, and then you had to check in that day. And there's all sorts of rules. Like if the fish were too hard, they'd say, no, you had them in the freezer. And they really like to not give you money on a lot of your fish that you checked in. So I was trying to do the math and I was like, I'm spending more money driving around to these dang check-in stations with these stupid fish that I didn't make any money. I was actually in the red, losing money every time, but it was fun. It was like just a summer gig of like, I didn't want to get a real job. So I was like, I'm just going to, and I didn't have a boat, so trying to fish from the bank is always more difficult and didn't work out for me, but it kept me from having to get a real job, as my dad said, for at least a couple of months.
your whole life, you mean?
Yeah. If you talk to Larry, he probably doesn't think I have a real job.
So, question for you. Since you live in the Columbia River, now you were a lot closer to Astoria than Bonneville Dam.
Yes.
Did you ever try shad fishing?
Oh, no, yeah, we'd go up to Willamette a lot and shad fish, and boy, that was a blast. I mean, they're stinky and slimy, but great crab bait, but they were on ultralight gear, like 2-pound test and stuff. Like, yeah, it's a lot of fun for sure.
Oh, it's a ton of fun. They average 1 to 3 pounds, and they're scrappy fighters. And I'm with you. I tried smoking one once in a Lure Jensen smoker, literally ruined the smoker. It was completely covered with shad oil, and I could never get the scent out. I had to throw it away. And no, I garage sailed it, and some poor sucker actually bought it for $20. I couldn't believe it. But
it's a hard smell to like describe too. They're so slimy and so stinky that you just can't get that off you. But it is a lot of fun, and it's great again to put in some crab pots and take them to the coast, and those crabs just eat them up.
Oh, it's the best crab bait I've ever had is shad. In fact, I've still got a few frozen shad that I'm going to be using this summer. So that's why I go shad fishing with a 5-gallon bucket, is just crab bait.
You do a bunch of crabbing?
Yeah, I do some. So what I'll do is, we have pink salmon over here, and they run every odd year. So this year they're going to be running. And I go to a place called Fort Casey State Park. It's on Whidbey Island, and it's an old turn of the century, and we're talking turn of the 19th, 20th century coastal artillery fort that was built to defend, Puget Sound and Seattle and Bremerton. And so it's really cool. You got a lighthouse up there. You got the old fortifications up there and a couple of old cannons. But down below, you can fish for the pink salmon. And when we'll fish for the pinks in the morning, fish for the pinks in the evening, and during the afternoon, we'll throw out crab snares or crab rings and usually catch red rock crab, not Dungeness, but red rock crab. And yeah, love it. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah, Brandon got to go clam digging.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we took him clam digging for the first time. Is that where you were going, Brandon? Talk about your clam digging experience.
Well, I was gonna get there, but I was gonna say, man, if I could catch crabs somewhere, that's all I would do. Like I have so much jealousy over Tom Hanks and Castaway. Like, you're telling me all you got to do is hunt crabs and fish and be left alone all day on a tropical island? Like, they should offer that as a vacation, where they just drop you off alone on a tropical island and all you do is eat crab and talk to a volleyball. Like, that would be, I would pay money for that experience. But yeah, the clam digging. When I was out there when I was out there steelhead fishing recently, one of the fellows made a off-color joke about clam hunting, and I said, I don't know if I take the bait here or if I'm that guy who's like, I've actually been clam hunting before, and here's how you do it. And eventually I did get there and explain to them the whole process of going out on the beach and how your mom is the best clam digger I've ever met and how much fun we had doing it. And I tried to order razor clams twice. They didn't have them on the menu, but I got steamers, and those were really good.
Steamers are good, but razor clams are great.
Shags doesn't like them. Spoiled. He's a spoiled guy. But
yeah,
I like them.
Too chewy for me. I mean, I love them in a chowder if you chop them up in tiny little pieces, but
Right.
just to fry them, it's too chewy for me. And I know that may be the one thing that my mom would disown me for, because she was 9 months pregnant with me out clam digging, and I think she was really hoping that I'd be her clam digging partner, and I just kind of walk around and point at holes. But I'm also 6'8". That's a long way down for me to have to then like dig a hole and then get to the ground. And they're so quick. I would rather be fishing.
Yeah, Johnny, saying you and I are more built for clam digging.
You guys are. Oh man. So John, you got like a sportsman show that you're speaking at coming up, right? Is that this weekend?
Yeah, I'm actually leaving right after we're done with this podcast. I'm taking off to the Washington Sportsman Show in Puyallup, and I'll be doing a seminar on places to fish in the Northwest for 2025. So picking out, I did this last year, doing some different destinations this year, but it'll be fun, just kind of sharing with people, hey, here's a good spot you may have not thought of before. So we're kind of ignoring like Buoy 10 at the Columbia River that everybody knows about, or Puget Sound Blackmouth and Coho that everybody knows about. It's like, let's talk about some of these more obscure fisheries that you probably haven't thought about. So like shad fishing is one that we'll definitely mention, because a lot of, we're talking like 4 to 6 million shad come up the river anymore every year. And it's just a hoot, as you know.
Oh, nonstop action for sure. Nonstop.
Oh, yeah. And, we're going to talk about ice fishing lakes over in Eastern Washington. We'll talk about some places to go, like in Montana, Fort Peck Reservoir, which is a huge, huge body of water that actually the total coastline of this reservoir is bigger than the coastline of California. It's like 103 miles. It's just massive.
I shot a whitetail, John, right on the north shore of Fort Peck Reservoir. When I lived in Montana, I used to go to that part of the state a lot. I mean, every 3 weeks. And Fort Peck is one of the most underutilized water resources in this country. I mean, nobody goes up there, and it's absolutely gigantic. And the northern pike fishing and the walleye fishing is phenomenal.
It's funny. I actually went up there with a guide, and he's one of the top walleye anglers in the state. Tournament anglers.
Jordan?
No, it was over at Fort Peck itself.
Okay.
And we went out there, and unfortunately, the day before I showed up, there was this huge windstorm. I mean, like 45 mile an hour winds constantly, and it just put the fish off the bite. So he had the forward-facing sonar, and you could see the fish. You could see all the pike, all the walleye, all the bass, and there was tons of them. I mean, he was putting us in the right place, but they just wouldn't bite. And he was fishing with me. Neither one of us got a bite all day long, and that was a 20-hour drive to get there.
Wow. Well, I'm actually leaving Thursday for Devil's Lake in North Dakota to ice fish for 3 days for yellow perch. Walleye as well. I mean, if we catch some of those walleye, I guess I'll suffer through.
Those pesky walleye
Those
getting in the
pesky
way of
walleye.
your yellow perch.
My goal is a 14-inch jumbo yellow perch. I'm gonna try to get 2 of them mounted. So I want a nice perch mount.
Are you going with a guide?
I am. It's I'm actually going as the guest of the chairman of the board of Retrieving Freedom. So it's my boss, I guess, and we're gonna spend 3 days talking business. And so he's treating me to this trip, which I'm really, really excited about. I mean, I've just got a mentor in my board chairman that I've always dreamed of. This guy's name's Al Hogan. He was a director of operations for Polaris for a long time. So ATVs, snowmobiles. He did the acquisition on Indian motorcycles and also the Victory motorcycles that Polaris produced. So northern Wisconsin guy, his dad had a bar when he was a kid called Big Al's Bar, and they're just all big guys, big Green Bay Packer fan type bar. And Al's just unbelievably intelligent and humble and just a big guy too. He's just really, really cool. And he's taken me up there, so I'm excited about that. And he said, we're going to have to cook some of our own food. I said, man, well, first of all, I'm a pretty good cook. I'll be fine. But second of all, I'm going to turn into Bubba from Forrest Gump, and we're going to have fried perch, baked perch, broiled perch, perch kebabs, perch on a stick, all the different ways.
I'm actually headed to the White River in Arkansas next weekend. I'm going to go down there with our good friend Blake Harris, and I'm going to get to do a test run on our fancy custom jigging rods that we're having made thanks to.
Oh, sweet. So is Blake backing out of the giving up the guidance stuff? I mean, at one time he was kind of breaking our heart, saying he might transition out of that.
Well, I think it was a long year, and so the winter time he just needs. It's hard to go days, weeks, months without clients because a lot of them like to back out. Like, oh, it's too cold. It's like, then why are you booking winter trips? But this isn't a guiding trip. This is more of just Dwayne and Mario, a bunch of the LOZ crew is all going down there, and
Ooh,
I got invited.
You cracked that code, huh?
I'm telling you, man. They said White River, and my eyes lit up. And he goes, "Are you interested in going?" I was like, "Let me think about." Yes, definitely.
You notice, John, how this is news to me, right? Like,
I noticed that.
I'm not getting the invites, so.
Well, you're in South Dakota. You just said you were going jumbo perch fishing, and
Well, my fragile ego would still like to be invited.
Well, would you like to go?
Well, thank you for asking. I would, but I'm sorry I can't.
Unfortunately, let me check my calendar. Busy. Can't go. So we're going to go down there and try to catch some monster brown trout on jigs. I'm really excited.
All right. So I gave you guys 3/4 of the podcast talk about fishing. John, I got to pick your brain a little bit about hunting out there. So, I'm doing the 50 and 50 by 50. My, a hunter experiencing America book, and I'm really narrowing down the West. I'm down to Washington State, California, Utah, and Nevada. And, I'm looking for something that is a high likelihood of success, something that I can actually draw. Like, I'd love to have a moose tag in Northeast Washington, but we're not going to get that. So I met a guy that has an opportunity for a mule deer hunt, a bow hunt for mule deer, which I like, but bow hunts are never high percentage success rates. What jumps out at you? What would, if I was like, John, we got to get something on the books so I can have a very Washington-esque but high likelihood of success hunt, what rings a bell for you?
Your best bet is whitetail deer hunting in Northeast Washington.
Okay.
specifically around Colville or Chewelah. Now, chronic wasting disease is starting to show up in that area, especially near Spokane, but it hasn't yet gotten to the Colville area. So statistically, that's your best bet to tag out, is to hunt over there. But even then, we're talking, a 20 to 33% success rate. So
Right.
hunting deer in Washington is not like hunting deer in Missouri. I've seen the numbers, and our harvests are a shadow of what Missouri's harvest is.
I'd really like to hunt a mountain lion. The two things that I haven't got on my list at this point are a mountain lion and a bull elk. And I'm really hoping Utah provides me an opportunity for the bull elk. But I know there's mountain lions up in Washington, quite a few of them, in fact. Do you have any leads on that?
Blue Mountains. So this is a whole different discussion, our Fish and Wildlife Commission, and how it's become a preservationist commission versus a North American model of conservation. So
Yeah.
our current commission really likes cougars and bears and wolves at the expense of elk and deer. And in the Blue Mountains, there was a herd there that's supposed to be a 5,000 animal herd, and it's currently around a 3,000 animal herd. And they did a calf, collar and mortality study about 3 years ago. And I think they collared 114 calves, and just about every one of them was killed. And the majority of them were killed not by wolves, not by bears, but by mountain lions. I think I want to say 77% of the calves that were killed by mountain lions. So that would be the place to go.
Well, I was reading
over-the-counter non-resident tag.
I believe you can get over-the-counter non-resident tag on cougars, but there's no hounds allowed in Washington, so it's hard. You can get a guide, and that'll help, but it's not easy to tag out on a cougar. Most cougar, success stories are guys that are out deer hunting, and the cougar just happens to show up while they're deer hunting. That's how it usually works.
If you can't hunt them with hounds, they're pretty. I'm not going to take a shot on trying to luck into one. So that kind of takes that off the table. Yeah, what's up with Washington, man? Like, you had that one crazy commissioner that came on there. Now, didn't they remove her?
No, they tried. The Sportsman's Alliance tried. Her name's Lorna Smith, but she's just one of. So there's 9 commissioners, and Governor Inslee, who thank God is now gone, he appointed basically 5 anti-hunting commissioners, and they eliminated the spring bear hunt in Washington State. They've made it very difficult to hunt cougars, and they refuse to delist wolves, even though wolves in parts of the state are doing very, very well. In fact, are even overpopulated in Northeast Washington. But you have these commissioners that literally they're environmentalists, and it's not been good for hunters at all.
No. What about elk? Is there any real high likelihood of drawing a tag opportunities for non-residents in Washington?
I would shoot for the Willapa Hills. So that's Southwest Washington. And there's a very healthy population of Roosevelt elk there. And that's far and away your best percentage bet of tagging out an elk is over there.
All right. You have any outfitters or anybody? I'm not using outfitters, but I can still poach some ideas from most of those guys.
I'll have to get back to you on that one. There's a couple that I'm aware of. There's a couple that I would not go with. But let me get back to you on that
outfitters, one. I've definitely hunted with some people like that, but I'm not using them because I can't afford a $10,000 elk hunt. We haven't got that private jet money yet, or that peanut butter and jelly money. So I'm still hunting on my own for the most part.
Yeah, but that is a good DIY area. So over by Long Beach, again, it's the Willapa Hills area. It's very good elk hunting, even for the DIY guy. And I think it's got, I want to say, close to a 25% harvest rate.
Which is kind of my neck of the woods.
Yes, it is.
On the other side of the river.
Yeah, Uncle
Mhm.
Steve got a nice elk this year. He's killed a lot of elk.
Yep, he's an elk slaying machine for sure. But John, you were talking about some outfitters that you wouldn't recommend, and I would argue that is even more important than ones that you would recommend, especially when you talk about spending money to go on a hunt.
Yeah, I mean, most guides, as we all know, are hardworking, they're personable, and they're good people to hunt or fish with. But there's a couple out there that I don't know how they still are in the game, but they are, and they're not the best experience. And so I tend not to say these names on the air, just because I don't want any legal troubles, if you know what I mean.
Oh
But
yeah.
if I'm asked privately, I'll say, just Google that guy's name, and you'll see what I mean. I'm not
Well,
going to say anything bad about him, but I'm saying you should Google his name before you book a trip with him.
it is pretty wild to me because out here in the Midwest, like with guides, like we love going on guided trips. I do, because I mean, you just get to sit back and fish and pretty much have everything taken care of for you. But boy, you start asking some of them Columbia River residents what they feel about guides, and it's a whole different ball game. That they're not the biggest fans of seeing those guide boats on the lower Columbia. And I think it has a lot to do with what you're talking about as well, of some of them just got the wrong attitudes or got GPS on their boat, so they think that spot's theirs, and it doesn't matter if you're anchored up there or trolling through that spot. They're not coming off their own line, and it just becomes really, well, it's become so popular. Sections of the Columbia and some of the some of the other rivers popping off it, the mouths of them have just come combat fishing. Like, you just got to be ready to have your gear tangled and to be bumping boats. And I've been on some pretty wild trips out there.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. And it, you know, as big of a river as the Columbia is, Buoy 10 gets really crowded really quick in August. And you're right, you run across that. And some of the guides feel entitled. A lot of people are jealous because, let's face it, guides catch more fish than the regular anglers. They do it for a living. And yeah, there's some real animosity towards some of the Columbia River guides. That's for sure.
But it's funny too, because you're like, it's a huge river, but we've all fished it. Sometimes those fish are in just a small section of this giant river because the currents are right, or they're hugged up against the bank, or what. But it's a lot of big boats trying to cram into a small space on a very large body of water.
No, you're absolutely right.
Man, I miss it. I do miss the Columbia River.
It's a massive body of water with all sorts of opportunity, and the one thing that you don't really have out there is the giant sturgeon that we have out here. I mean, I remember walleye fishing with a crankbait and hooking up with 12-pound test line on a 6-foot sturgeon. And I fought that thing for like 35 minutes, finally got it to the boat, and it finally, got off the lure, which is what we wanted, which was great. But it's like, you never know what you're going to catch in that river. It's just, you catch anything in there.
That's
Well,
so
our
true.
good buddy, Scott Pauly, I was with him on a trip. It was the National Wildlife Federation trip, and we were in Skamania at the Skamania
Yes.
Lodge. He caught a 9-foot sturgeon, and that thing jumped out of the water, like completely out of the water. A video of it. It's insane.
Dinosaurs, man.
Shags, have
They
you ever
are.
caught one of those?
Oh yeah. I mean, not that big. The biggest one I ever caught was 5 feet 11 inches. I didn't quite crack the 6-foot mark, but Brad Brooks, who I'm always talking about, my fishing buddy, he caught an 8-footer in 5 feet of water. That's the scary thing about them giant sturgeon. They can either be in 100 feet or 5 feet. John, kind of like what you're saying, you just never know where you're going to stumble across one.
Well, the next time I go out there with you, man, I wanna do that. Maybe we could hook up with John and we can all go sturgeon fishing.
Yeah, it's fun. I just love it because you use these giant meat rods, and the way they have like their weird vacuum mouth, they just suck things off the bottom, so that giant rod just starts tapping. It doesn't generally won't bury or anything. It'll just like tap, 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 and you're like, oh, you're getting a hit, and you just don't know if it's going to be a dink, a small one, or if it's going to be a giant until you set that hook. And man, when you set that hook and that pole goes straight down and starts peeling line, God, that's an exciting feeling. Sturgeon fishing was my favorite growing up in in high school, and when we started to have our own, Brad had his own boat. Like we would just do nothing but sturgeon fish all year long. Back when the season was open all year, which was wild to think about now. Now you get maybe one weekend a year.
Actually, it was one day this year. That they were supposed to be open for like 3 days, but they reached the quota in one day in the Bonneville pool. But
is that just for
you can still do catch and release sturgeon fishing all year long.
Okay. Well, there for a while, though, you couldn't, right? Not even catch and release. I thought for a while they just completely shut it down on the Columbia River. I mean, this was like years ago.
Yeah, I think they did. But anymore, you can pretty much do catch and release all the time. And also even at Lake Roosevelt. But one of my favorite sturgeon stories, because I always thought they were like bottom feeders. And they were just like, they got that vacuum cleaner mouth. They were sucking stuff off the bottom. And I was shad fishing with my best friend below Bonneville Dam, and there was a kid that was next to us, and we're just hammering him. I mean, it's like we're doing the old mana mana song, mana mana bum ba ba da, fish on, mana mana ba 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 fish on. And this poor kid next to us, he just wasn't in the right rhythm, didn't have the right whatever it was. He wasn't getting any bites, so he finally caught one, and he's reeling it in. And the sturgeon literally came out of the water and took his shad away. And so he never got his shad. And these shad, they would cruise right by the shoreline. And you'd hook up with them all the time with your shad darts, your little jigs.
Yeah.
And it was like earrings and accessories for the shad or the sturgeon. I mean, you'd like hook this sturgeon, or you'd see the sturgeon come by with like 15 different shad darts on its back in different colors. It's like, an accessorized sturgeon. How wonderful. What a good looking sturgeon that is.
Oh, that's too funny. So I'm curious, we're starting to come towards the tail end of this, but also there's just so many fishing opportunities out there. Do you do a lot of kokanee fishing too in the lakes or the reservoirs? I always enjoyed chasing those landlocked salmon.
Yes, kokanee fishing is big, and we've got a number of really good destinations. Lake Chelan, Lake Roosevelt, Wallowa Lake in Oregon actually gave up the world record kokanee a few years back. And as a matter of fact, I was fishing that day at Wallowa Lake when it was caught with my daughter, but we were fishing at the marina of the state park for trout. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, fond memories of being on Wallowa Lake. Did a lot of trout and kokanee fishing there.
Beautiful place.
Man, it really is. Oregon and Washington. If you're an outdoorsman, it's got both those states have anything and everything for you, because just the way they're split up. Like you have the Pacific section, the Northwest section that's like rainforest, and everything's huge and green and lush. A lot of rain, but there's a reason why it's always green all the time. But then you hit the mountain range, and if you love outdoor mountain sports, skiing and snowboarding, you got that. And then you get into the eastern side that gets a little more deserty, and some great hunting and fishing opportunities out there too. It's really outdoor, like an outdoor paradise in my opinion.
No, it really is. You're absolutely right.
Well, do you want to go into the mystery bait bucket, Brandon, or do you got some other questions for John?
No, we better let him get on the road. The celebrity must get to his event.
So, John, first off, thanks for being a part of this. Now, we usually wrap up our podcast with what we call the mystery bait bucket. This is a vintage antique bait bucket we got from the Midway Antique Mall. We put questions in it submitted by listeners, fans, friends, family, anybody. Very rarely do they have anything to do with outdoors. It's just a fun way to end the podcast. I'll read the question, who it's from, and we'll all go around and answer it.
Okay.
And if you want to submit a question, you can email info@driftwoodoutdoors.com, or you can let us know in the comments section on YouTube. Remember, subscribe to get entered into that fishing trip with Brandon and I, or just sneak into our DMs on Instagram or Facebook, Driftwood Outdoors. This one comes from Tim Stevens. What's a thing you hated as a kid but love now?
Waking
Naps.
up early. Yeah, I'm the opposite. You want more sleep. I'm shifting my sleep pattern, so I guess that's part of getting old. If we both spit out something to do with sleep, but like most young people, I would have rather slept in when I was younger. But anymore, it's like I gotta force myself to stay in bed. Like I like getting up early, so I'm just gonna lean into it. I'm gonna start being an early riser.
Well, yeah, doing that morning radio show anymore, if I'm still asleep by 7 a.m., even on the weekends, that's like wild to me. Even Saturday, I was up at 5. Like, oh, I'm
Ugh.
supposed to be able to sleep in. It's 5 a.m. Up and moving. But I could
think
also
that's
go
my
ahead.
new goal is to start getting up at 5 a.m.
Yeah, Savannah's doing 5 a.m. CrossFit. She's nuts.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I don't want to do that. I want to do like 5 a.m. sitting in my robe, having a cup of coffee, like kind of easing into the day.
Oh, she's easing into it, doing box jumps, burpees, and herkin jerks or whatever it is, slinging weights above her head.
You go ahead and schedule that wedding, and a woman loses her mind about it. Now she's
Man.
up at 5 a.m. doing burpees.
Well, she was on that mission before we actually planned the date, and now she's got me in the gym because I can't be the fat, lazy slob. So I've hit the gym every single day this year.
I will say she was telling me how proud of you she is.
Well,
So you must be showing up and doing it.
Hitting the gym, man. I used to be an athlete, so just trying to get back in some decent shape. But I could also say vegetables. Hated them as a kid, but now as an adult, I don't mind some Brussels sprouts or some good greens. I mean, I'm all about it. How about you, John?
I'm with you on the veggies. I was thinking the same thing. Like broccoli, I hated as a kid, but I'm okay with broccoli now, and I'm okay with I didn't like cooked carrots as a kid, but now I'm fine with cooked carrots. But there are some veggies that I will never love, and that would be lima beans. Lima beans are the worst. And lima beans and liverwurst is like the worst meal you could give somebody. Don't do it. I'm glad liverwurst is no longer a thing. I don't even know why.
Said that like anybody listening might be surprised. like here's a big shocker to everybody: lima beans and liverwurst, not good.
No, but
somebody out there though, there is that one person out there somewhere being like, "Oh, BS! Like they're the best."
Oh, my grandma was like that. Old Wildemay loved that type of stuff. Like, different generation, I guess.
Definitely 2 generations past. Yeah, no, ever. So,
that's too funny. All right, man. Final thoughts. The final cast of the pod. John, it was nice to meet you, man. It was fun to reminisce. I love the Pacific Northwest. I love that area. And yeah, man. Anytime you want to talk fishing, let's get. You got my number now since we had some technical difficulties and it was on my end, not yours.
I was convinced it was on my end.
But I'm glad I said it too. I was like, we need to get Brandon on here. This may be me and not you. And turned out it was, I had the wrong thing clicked on my end. But I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. So just thanks for sitting down and telling some tall tales and some great things about my home region. Appreciate you.
Oh, absolutely. And if either one of you are ever out here, come on by. I'll take you out bass fishing. You got a place to stay.
Man, I appreciate that very much. But if I'm coming to the Pacific Northwest, I don't want to go bass fishing. We need you to come to Missouri to do that. Like, let's go crabbing. Let's go crabbing, baby.
We could take you on some real fun trout streams out here. Missouri's got some underrated trout fishing. We got some real beautiful spring-fed rivers that it's a lot of fun where you got a chance to catch some big brown trout in some very small water. It can get a lot of fun.
That would be a ton of fun. I love brown trout. They're my favorites.
Yeah, Shags likes them, especially when they're broiled in butter.
Oh, we haven't heard that joke in forever.
It's been a while.
It has been. He likes to give me a hard time, but as you can tell, I got my replicas back there of the big browns.
Look at you. Look at you.
Yeah.
He had to get replicas so he could still eat the fillets.
Yeah. You're a dick. Those were both catch and release. You'll be happy to know. But John, where can people go to find out more about you? I'll put it in the show notes as well. You got a website. Where can people go to listen to your radio show?
A couple of websites. So just go to AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com. We are on several stations in Missouri. And you can also find our other show, our regional show at NorthwesternOutdoors.com. So again, AmericaOutdoorsRadio.com or NorthwesternOutdoors.com.
Awesome. Gear review coming up next. Brandon, it's the end of the podcast, the beginning of the gear review. What are you reviewing for us today?
Since we're all dog guys, we came across a few of these at work. The retractable leashes. I don't know if you guys have ever used the retractable leashes, but lots of different brands. I've got a couple of these here. Man, what a game changer to just have it right there. You can let your dog run out a little bit, hit the stop button here. It locks the leash in. You can retract them back in. So if you're still the good old fashioned, 5 or 6 foot long leash, you might want to look into one of these retractable leashes. I've really enjoyed switching over.
Well, with mine's dog related too. I promised my mom I'd do this because Chewy.com, it's a sad story. Unfortunately, mom and dad had to put down their Springer, Quincy. She had diabetes and was going blind and then got dementia. And the vet was like, it's probably about time that you put her down. And so it was a very tough thing for them to have to decide to do. And they had bought in a giant bag of diabetic dog food from Chewy. And mom was just like, you know what? It's okay. I don't want to call anyone. She was really emotional about what happened. And dad was like, I'll call, because it was, a significant amount of money for this giant bag of dog food. And Chewy, their customer service, they didn't even question it. They go, money back in their account immediately while they were on the phone. And they go, you get rid of that dog food as you see fit. So mom donated it to the vet to say, hey, if there's anybody else that's got a diabetic dog, here's a big bag of dog food, like a 3-month supply. And then Chewy sent them a bouquet of roses with a note talking about how sorry they were for the loss of their dog, and then followed up with another letter just saying sorry again. So mom was really emotional telling me that story. And she goes, you do the podcast, you do the gear review. We just give them a shout out, because I don't think she wanted to put it on social media, because we can all know how everyone's going to blow up the comment section, and then you feel like you need to talk about it. And she just didn't want to have to go through that again. But Chewy, if you're listening, thank you very much. You mean a lot to my family. That was really nice of you, not only to give them the money back, but then to send them the roses and the letters. So well played. Thank you very much.
We'll see you down the trail.
All right. Good.